went to see Bernie and said, Bernie, great news. I've signed, I've got an agreement with Martin Brundle. And he looked at me and said, Martin Brundle, that's the worst decision ever made in the history of Brabham. The guy's a complete waste of time. Whether you're a tennis player, a footballer, golf, or whatever it is, the big points, you can identify the big points. It's match point. And yeah, Yuki may fail now we've got the big points for him, but he may actually go to an even higher level. And there's no way anybody should say Liam Lawson is not quick or doesn't have the talent. For sure he does, but he became dominated by data. That's what's destroyed him right now. As I've said all along, you know, they should have kept Carlos Sainz. Not that Lewis isn't going to do a better job than Carlos. I think he will. That's not my point. My point is, to get the best from Charles, it would have been better to have had Carlos in the other car.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me, as always, my friend and yours, the goatiest, for the avoidance of doubt, F1 mind to have ever goated, the one that they call Peter de Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm good, mate. I'm very good. Spring is with us. Actually, it's early summer already. It's pretty hot, blue sky, incredible here in Spain. Hope it is that nice where you are.
It's not too bad, Peter, but I don't want to jinx it. Every time I say that the weather's good, you know, you can guarantee that the next day it will be rain upon rain. There are a couple of F1-centric threads at which I want for you to pull. Yeah. Peter, Yuki Tsunoda announced as replacement for Liam Lawson. Did Red Bull make the right decision?
Well, it's a double whammy thing here, isn't it? It's not only Yuki, but also Liam being demoted to the B team, which may actually be a promotion, of course, given the way the car's going at the moment. We shouldn't forget that, the B team car, that is. So what was the question? So is Yuki what?
Did they make the right decision?
Yeah. I mean, you asked me in the last time we chatted, if I was in their position, what would I do? And I think that was 2 days before they took the decision, or maybe they'd taken it before they announced it anyway. And yeah, absolutely the right decision. Don't know why they didn't do that over the winter, really, because Yuki had been consistently improving throughout 2024, even 23. To my mind, and I said this a few times, the one area where he really needed to improve was his emotional stability, which is unusual for Japanese drivers. They're normally pretty disciplined, but I felt he was quite, sparky, and I think he's done that. I think he's done that quite well, and we saw that string of points finishes last year. I mean, if that wasn't enough to show Red Bull that he was good enough to be in the A team, then I don't know what is. Of course, the problem was it was all complicated by the Sergio Perez situation. And don't forget, right up until, well, the back end of the year, they were still hoping and thinking that Sergio would be their driver in 2025. And if he'd won a couple of races at the end of the year or had some really good results right behind Max and maybe out-qualified him once or twice, then he'd probably still be in the car. So that was still going on. And if you're trying to give Sergio as much rope as you can, and then you come to the conclusion he's not going to cut it, and you've got to do something for the sake of the Constructors' Championship in 25 and beyond, whatever the thinking was, then I think it's easier to say, well, we want somebody completely different to Sergio. We want somebody very young, very hungry, who's going to get out there and get the maximum from the car every time he's in it, 100%. That's got to be Liam Lawson, because that's the aura he projects. And to some extent, that is the result that he's always given when he's been out in a car. But of course, what they never did was spend too much time thinking about the way Liam actually drives, as I keep saying. And it's very clear ever since Formula 3 that he's been an oversteery, lean on the rear, wide entry, late braking type driver, which leaves very little margin for error if you're on the absolute limit, or by which I mean, 2 seconds to go before the checkered flag in qualifying, or if serious variables come into play, by which I mean semi-wet, crosswind, changing track conditions, strange tires you've never used before, whatever it is. Now, you could argue, well, a reflexy driver, sort of Ronnie Peterson type driver, should be able to adapt to all that. But of course, that's deceiving, because a reflexy Ronnie Peterson, Jochen Rindt, Liam Lawson, if you want to put it that way, type driver doesn't actually leave any margin for error. By definition, the way they drive is all about being on the absolute ragged edge all the time. And the minute they step over it, their only recourse is to back away from it, which shows up in the next lap, and then they're slower. Whereas a complete driver, and there are many out there in the history of the planet. Certainly at the moment, you'd have to put Max, to some extent Charles when he's focused, Lewis still, I think. And possibly Oscar, but let's not put Oscar there because he's quite clearly using wide entries at the moment. For those drivers, there is a much bigger area on which to maneuver and to manipulate the car if things are surprising you. And things always do surprise you in a racing car. Every corner is different, every lap. So did they take that into account? I don't think they did. I don't think they actually had the ability to take that into account. But even if they did, they certainly didn't give themselves a time frame, because it was, okay, we can't continue with Sergio. We'll put in the opposite extreme. He's got to be Liam Lawson. They never thought, probably, actually Yuki's the better guy, because even at that reflex test we had on that dirt oval, the quarter-mile oval, which was a Red Bull promotion, when they both drove NASCAR stock cars in a completely foreign environment that neither had ever trodden on before, Yuki beat Liam. And to me, that was very, very significant. I'm probably the only guy in the world that thinks it was significant. I think everybody else says, oh, well, it's only a promotion, doesn't matter. But, I've seen a million promotions in my time with Grand Prix drivers taking part. And I can tell you now, every guy wants to beat the other one, particularly if they're teammates. And I thought not only was that disappointing from Liam's point of view, but it was also, wow, Yuki Tsunoda has serious feel for the car and for what to do with the car, because he's adapting that well. And I don't think any of that stuff filtered into Red Bull, because for so long they've been results driven in terms of their young driver in their academy. And I think that's a great shame, because if you applied a results driven criteria to, for example, to the career of Nigel Mansell, he had never made it out of Formula 3. So it's according to Red Bull. So, I think I've talked about this a million times, but it all started with the whole Scott Speed thing, didn't it? Because Scott Speed was okay, lots of good results. I'm not saying he was the best guy out there at the time, but they opted for Scott Speed as the next American superstar. And around him, they created effectively a Formula 3000 budget, which would have been, let's say for the sake of argument, €1 million. And then, because he wasn't good enough to earn a Formula 1 drive at that point, they bought the Minardi team for him in order to operate. That's why they now own this B team, purely because they wanted to give Scott Speed a drive. Nobody else would. So that was, I don't know how much, let's call it 8 to 10 at that point. And then there was the running cost, I think for 2 years there, which was, let's call that another, whatever, at least 30, 40. So whatever way you look at it, they probably spent $100 million on Scott Speed, and the guy was never, ever going to have the talent to make it. So they made these mistakes classically years ago, and they're still making them now. Of course, on the other side of the coin, they have given us Sebastian Vettel, they have given us Max Verstappen, they have given us Daniel Ricciardo, and the Sainz situation, and Pierre Gasly, you could say. There's a few others, but I would say, if in terms of drivers they've signed against drivers they've actually had success with, it's pretty heavily on the debit side at the moment. Although you could argue that, of course, Max's success makes up for all the debit. I suppose you could use that argument, but it certainly, for a long time, and it's not only Red Bull, to be honest, it's the academy system of virtually every Grand Prix team, most of which are all there as money-making operations and not really to develop talent. They develop, perhaps they help them with budgets, perhaps they help them with media stuff, perhaps they help them with understanding the engineering and getting in the sim, but do they actually help them when it comes to driving the racing car under pressure? Obviously not, because look at Liam Lawson.
Very well said, Mr. Windsor. And I was about to say the exact same thing about debit side of their balance sheet come P&L, because it feels like if F1 is a sport where all that matters is what have you done for me lately, that you're only as good as your last race. It feels like if we're gauging how good or bad the decision making of Red Bull has been over the past, let's say, 10 years. 10 years ago was when they made their last good decision, which of course was to get in the next generational driver of his era, and Max Verstappen. Since then, Peter, it's been nothing but bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. So is Tsunoda then not the latest in a long line of bad decisions?
Well, the problem is the academy for Red Bull as indeed for other race teams, Grand Prix teams, is not an organically logical system. As I say, I would say all of them are based on who is the next young karter, who has a lot of money behind him, and then that who has a lot of money behind him in italics, because very, very few young karters with zero budget ever make it now, sadly, because of the system we have. You've got to show you've got a bit of money to get him into a decent karting team, which is expensive for most parents around the world anyway. So what these systems are not is the 1.5-inch thick document I gave to Liberty in year 2 of Liberty's ownership of Formula One, which was a way of discovering and honing young driver talent in all the continents of the world, particularly the regions where we don't have strong representation in Formula One, South Africa, India, and countries like that, China and Vietnam. And it was a system obviously based on karting, but having good scouts out there, not worrying about money, but looking at the way the guys actually drove the karts, having runoff races, and then bringing the top 10 from all these different continents to Europe every year and putting them through a system like that of Rob Wilson's, where you're very, very focused on pedal inputs, throttle inputs, steering inputs, when to apply all the different dynamic weights when you're trying to manage a racing car on the limit, not the stuff that, they're currently doing in the sim and all the other rubbish they're doing. And of course that required a budget, particularly if you then came down to say the top 3 in any given year, because you had to finance them into Formula 3, Formula 2, or Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2. And the budget was whatever it was going to be, 30 million a year, something like that, which alongside the money they spend, Liberty that is, in looking at new territories, trying to put on Grand Prix in new territories, trying to get countries around the world involved, particularly the United States, is absolute peanuts compared with putting on a Grand Prix or trying to put on a race in that country, having a driver from that country. You imagine the impact if there was a Peruvian star as good as Max Verstappen on his way up.
Wow.
Coming into Formula One. Do you imagine what that would do for Formula One in South America, in Peru, just as one example, or South Africa? South Africa is an even better example. Everyone would say, wow, yeah, we don't need the race, we got the driver. And that's the key thing. It's much cheaper to develop drivers than it is to put on a Grand Prix, for Pete's sake. The problem is, from Formula One's point of view, they see everything is short term and they get a much faster return on investment from staging a race, promoting a new race and getting all the revenue from that race than they do in what they would see as some haphazard gamble of trying to find these young talented drivers around the world who may take 7 years to make it to Formula One. That's the problem. And because everybody has very, very short-sightedness in Formula One, it's probably never going to happen. It's a great shame because it'd be very, very easy to do. I could tell you now 10 guys that I would trust with my life to put in 10 different regions of the world to look at young talent and to make notes of how they drive, what they're doing, what their attitude is like, their propensity to learn, their propensity to be self-critical, and then to be able to bring those together collectively to the UK and start to hone their driving talent in the way that Rob Wilson honed Kimi Raikkonen's driving talent. And he's done quite a lot for Lance Stroll and Valtteri Bottas over the years. So that's what's wrong with it all. It's all too difficult. And that's what I was told. When I gave this dossier to Liberty, they said, oh yeah, it looks great. It's all very complicated, isn't it? And that was it, thick document. Who's ever going to read that? And so it went nowhere. And so here we are saying, oh, why is it Red Bull have got so many failures? Well, it's because they don't have an organically logical system. The whole Red Bull, let's find a Formula One American world champion thing. I think they had like 15 drivers. And I was there. I was actually comparing the event when they announced all the drivers in the States that were going to be in this Red Bull Academy thing to get them into Formula One. And the result was Scott Speed, because not once actually did they do a proper evaluation of driving talent. That was the problem.
Oof. Mr. Windsor, you're speaking the gospel here. However, I would see that and raise you this, Peter. Red Bull find themselves in this situation not by dint of some of the bad decisions that they've made, but some of the good decisions that they haven't made. Carlos Sainz, you said, was free, brilliant as far as his technical feedback, desperate to get himself in either a Mercedes or a Red Bull, and Red Bull did one of these and pretended as if they couldn't see the light that was before them. So too Oscar Piastri sat on the Alpine subs bench for 2 years. Red Bull had the opportunity, would have you'd imagine, to sign him, and yet again they seized defeat from the Moors no jaws of victory. It feels like they just keep making bad decisions at the altar of trying to keep Max Verstappen, and ironically, in making those bad decisions, in now getting rid of Liam Lawson, who Max Verstappen wanted to keep, it feels like they're about to sacrifice Yuki Tsunoda now at the altar of their bad decision making, plunging him into nothing if not a pressure cooker of an environment at his home Grand Prix in a very mercurial, temperamental RB21 as far as its handling dynamic. What are they doing, Peter? It makes no sense.
Well, on top of that, how are they going to handle it when Liam Lawson outqualifies him as well? Which he might, because the car, we know how good the Racing Bulls car is. I can't bring myself anymore to call it the Visa Cash app, because I've spent all morning trying to get onto the ridiculous Barclaycard Visa app. And even though last time I noted down the 9-digit pin they wanted me to remember, the minute I opened it up and said, "What is your 5-digit pin?" I've never had a 5-digit pin. If they change this thing every time I open it, these guys just ought to give up, I think. Anyway, getting back to the point. Yeah, you know, but I think hopefully somebody at Red Bull, probably Christian Horner, has got a brain enough to be able to say to Yuki, look, don't even worry about what happens here this weekend. It's mayhem. We know it's going to be mayhem for you. Whatever happens, happens. Do your best. We'll be there for support you. Effectively, your new relationship with Red Bull begins in Bahrain. Don't worry about this weekend. That's what they should be saying. Instead of which they may be saying, "Come on, you can do it. Yeah." You know, and then it could end in tears. But you know, you mentioned some of those other drivers. The Oscar Piastri thing, I mean, he was always on the radar, wasn't he? And I think, yeah, I mean, they could have got him. He might have done what Zach did, maybe, but yeah, a better example is Carlos Sainz, of course, because he would be absolutely perfect alongside that car, alongside Max now, because he would be able directly to relate it to the Ferrari, which is a really important point. But beyond that, we know how good and professional he was by the end of last year. I mean, it's all starting to fall apart now, as I predicted, in a car as irascible as the Williams and a driver as good as Alex Albon alongside him. So it's a great shame. And the reason they didn't sign Carlos, I think, was because Max didn't want him, because something happened between them when they were at Toro Rosso together. And, you know, Carlos actually looked pretty good alongside Max. He certainly didn't blow Max away, but the reverse wasn't true either. You know, Carlos was there. And maybe it was that. Maybe it was some crosswords, and that was it, you know, never again. And that's a great shame, because I think Carlos would be the perfect guy in the Red Bull right now, and they'd be in much better shape as a result. So, and you know, as for other drivers, I think it's, you know, to me, a guy with enormous talent is Alex Palou, and he's been around a long time in Europe. It was very clear when Adrian Campos Sr. put his trust in him and put him into Formula 3, financing it a lot himself, how good Palou was. And nobody in Formula 1 was interested, because didn't bring a lot of money with him or whatever, or not invented here, or whatever their stupid excuse was. And there he is, you know, looking brilliant in America now. And no surprise, this guy, the minute you see Palou in a car, you know he's got it. Short corners, softness of touch, really, really good. And, you know, that, to me, that's a big example of Formula 1 missing the boat. I've also talked about Fred Vesti, and, you know, have we ever really given Pourchaire a proper go? No. Nobody knows how quick Pourchaire is. We know he's very quick because we've seen that in Formula 2, but we don't know how quick. But nobody's even bothering to give him a chance. It's pathetic.
It's weird the way that the F2 seasons work these days, Peter. It's almost like if you don't win it in your maiden voyage, then you're instantly thrown onto the F1 heap, not fit for purpose. Rather give it to a Kimi Antonelli or an Ollie Behrman, neither one of whom completed an entire season, right? It's like you've got to be on the next best one as early as possible, rather than letting them cut their teeth like Teo or Felipe.
I don't think there's any logic to it. There's no logic really to any of that. If you compare Isaac Hadjar in Formula 2 with Théo Pourchaire, how can you say that Pourchaire's career wasn't as good as Isaac Hadjar's? There's no logic in it.
Yeah, no, I think
None.
I think they'd argue, Peter, that Isaac's flame was burning brighter earlier on in his career than was
Really?
Teo's. Yeah,
Pourchaire in Formula 3 was unbelievable.
I know.
No,
Yeah,
it depends what sort of lens they're looking through, of course. But if you try to be reasonably objective, then how can you say that?
yeah.
Luke Browning, good English driver. Is anybody talking about Luke Browning? Pretty good. Max Esterton, very quick, considering where he's come from and the budget he's got. He's seriously quick in Formula 2, I think. Is anybody talking about Max Esterton as a potential American star in the future? And so it goes on. The reason I speak like this, and possibly people say, "Oh, Windsor always moaning about it," but I'm a guy. I didn't give it away, but I was thinking the other day when I was doing a live stream, I think and something was going wrong in the live stream, and I was, I guess, showing my age by not understanding what button to press. And somebody said, "Oh, you're getting old, Peter." And I thought, "Oh, yeah, they're right. Thanks for saying that. I am. How did I get to be this age?" So quickly. And I thought, well, I spent 12 years with Nigel Mansell. I spent 10 years with Carlos Reutemann. So there's 22 years gone. Then there was the whole Bernie Ecclestone thing. That accounted for another 10 years. Oh, bang. And here we are, take those 30 years away. And that's where I should be. So those periods just went bang, bang, bang so quickly. And the point I'm making is I spent, 15 years with Nigel, basically talking to him every day of his life and living his career with him, trying to help him in every conceivable way I could, whether it be money, dropping the word at the right time, whether it be advice on other things, trying to be there for him. And I've lived that situation of a driver having nobody believe in him and having no opportunity to prove his talent. I've lived that for approximately 5 years. And I know what it's like. And so that's why it really irritates me now that Formula One hasn't really got its act together and embraced drivers in that situation. They still haven't got their act together. And it's a great shame. It's a great shame. It's because it's so money driven and money orientated. And so many things spring to mind. But I mean, one of them was in the brief period when I was, in theory, running the Brabham team in 1989. The driver that I immediately honed in on as would be perfect alongside Stefano Modena was Martin Brundle, who had yet to show his real talent, who I really believed in because he wasn't far away from Nigel in touring cars in the famous BMW County Saloon race at Silverstone. And he had a lovely touch as well, very Lando Norris-esque. And I had lunch with Martin's manager, Nick Britton, in a nice restaurant in Sloane Square. And we did a deal. It wasn't a big retainer, but it was basically incentive to do with scoring championship points, certainly top three, big bonus and so forth. Nick was delighted. Nobody else is showing any interest in Martin at all. In sports cars, yes, not in Formula One. So that we shook hands on the deal. Everything was fine. I went back to the Brabham factory. Bernie was in his office. Went to see Bernie. He said, "Bernie, great news. I've got an agreement with Martin Brundle." And he looked at me and said, "Martin Brundle, that's the worst decision ever made in the history of Brabham. The guy's a complete waste of time." Need I say more? That is the attitude. And it's not only Bernie, it was a lot of people. It was Ron Dennis saying the same about Nigel Mansell back in 1981. And they have no idea. They have no idea about talent. And it's the same. Red Bull have no idea really about why Liam Lawson is slow. They probably think, "Oh, we went in too soon, too deep, or the car's too difficult." I don't know what they think. They have no idea. They've never watched him out on the track, I guess, because if they did, they'd understand why he can't drive the car, as I've said in several videos already.
Is that second seat, Peter, just the poison chalice? And again, if I focus on Yuki Tsunoda,
It's not, Cameron. No, it's a very, very good seat. It's a very good seat because if it's a good car, you're going to finish behind Max in every race and you might win or two. You'll get on the podium with that car. It's still probably the best race team in Formula One. It's a fabulous racing car. What Daniel Ricciardo was thinking when he walked out of that team, I have still no idea, apart from money, of course. That's obviously what he was thinking. But nothing made sense about why anybody would want to leave Red Bull. It's a great car. And if it's a bad car, you're in there you got nothing to lose, have you? You're still learning from very, very good people in the pit lane. It's a great car, that number 2 Red Bull. It's a brilliant thing for Yuki Tsunoda. He will absolutely love being in that team. He'll love it.
Peter, I feel like it's the right car, right team, wrong time for Yuki. I feel like
it could well be, Cameron. Nothing is perfect, but you get a big point in your life, whether you're a tennis player, a footballer, golf, or whatever it is. The big points you can identify the big points. It's match point, at Wimbledon, whatever it is. It's the big points, and Yuki may fail. Now we've got the big points for him, but he may actually go to an even higher level. He might, he might be sensible. He might be intelligent enough to take Max out to dinner and start to think about the way Max works and look at the way he operates. He'll take out the chief mechanic. He'll talk to Christian Horner more than he ever has before. All the good people there he can learn from in a way that he's never been able to do that before. And I think he's bright enough to do that. And certainly if he can talk to Max and get Max's confidence, that will for sure help Yuki Tsunoda, for sure, because he's got the brain to be able to absorb that. So I think he's in a great position. And it's a big point. It's Nigel Mansell being thrown into Elio De Angelis's car with 8 minutes of practice at the Dutch Grand Prix to go, and he's still got Elio's seat and pedals and nothing fits, and he puts on one set of tires, go out and do a time. It's only going to do 1 lap, and he goes 2/10 slower than Elio. It's those big points. Yeah. And that's it. He may fail at the big points, who knows? But I suspect he's quite tough now, and he will live with that.
Well,
but when you say it's a poison chalice, again, the reason I'd say it's not is because I've been around long enough to know what the number 2 car in a poison chalice team looks like, i.e. the second Lotus, when Lotus were in Formula One. And that's a second car. That's a car that probably most drivers wouldn't want to have been in. But in this era, when you've got 2 cars virtually identical in every respect, apart from setup, but in terms of strength and all the important parts of the car, that second Red Bull, I mean, it's a brilliant car to have. Yeah. Brilliant drive to have.
It just feels like, for me, Peter, that Yuki's not necessarily the driver that you'd expect, that you'd pick out in an ideal world, an ideal set of circumstances to thrive in the chaos that is that Red Bull circumstance as at March 20 or April now 2025. It just feels like I would have loved for them to put Yuki in the seat, make the decision, put Yuki in the seat for 2025, give him all the sim time that he needs, make sure that we're due diligence up, that we're prim and proper, and then we get a real read on whether Yuki could be a good number 2 to Max. But now, under these circumstances, Japanese Grand Prix, the final one of the Honda Red Bull collab, and Yuki's out there doing all these show runs, and it's like, I feel like I don't think Yuki can prosper in that circumstance.
Given how unsuccessful all the sim sessions were for Liam Lawson over the winter, surely that's an indictment of the whole sim thing. Should just be thrown out the window now, forget about it, and drive much more on gut feel and rely on your own talent. And I think it's a perfect way for Yuki to get in without having to do all that stupid sim time. A, and B, he's Japanese. So hopefully he's bright enough to just, sorry, don't understand, and just put on the headset and do his own thing and talk to the key people in the team, keep his mind very, very quiet and clean, and get out there and drive the car on gut feel. If he does that, he'll go well. If he does everything you've just said, or if he did have the opportunity to do all that, I think he'd get very confused. Yeah. All that sim stuff. Oh, yeah, you're faster than Sergio Perez. Oh, yeah, Liam Lawson was a bit quicker here. Oh, yeah, Max does this. He wouldn't know what he was doing. Let the guy drive the race car. That's what it's all about. If he doesn't have that gut feel of how to drive the race car his way, it's never going to happen. And Liam Lawson tried to, I think, put in all the inputs from all the sim work, all the data, all the engineering. He got completely confused in his mind. And that's the problem. Too much information. Aldous Huxley, ghost in the machine. It's just completely over the top now in Formula One. And this is a very good example. I've got to say at this point, chapeau to Toto Wolff and the Merck boys, because they seem to have got a very, very good guy now in Kimi Antonelli. They've done a very good job of showing that you can jump that way and do well in Formula One straight away. So full marks to them. They've got it right. They've got the balance right, and Antonelli's in there doing his own thing, kind of. I just hope he's starting to work on fast corners and backing away a little bit from fast corners, and just and not being so edgy and spiky, sort of George Russell like on the fast corners, because I don't think he has George's level of car control at 192 miles an hour through a blind left-hander with a crosswind. But I do think he's got the measure of George on slow and medium speed corners. I think he's really, really good there. And full marks again to Mercedes for honing that.
They've made a good decision for the first time in the last 5 years.
It's not made a decision. They've done a good job with their decision.
Agreed.
That's the point. You can make all these decisions. They're all pretty good, these guys, but you need to get the best from them. Liam Lawson is not Kimi Antonelli. And I don't mean that in terms of pace. I mean that in the way he drives the racing car. There's nothing wrong in driving it like Ronnie Peterson, providing you let him be Ronnie Peterson. But don't try and confuse him with all this data and all this sim stuff and get him to do this and that and the tire management, all this rubbish. Let him drive the car. And then I think it would have been the same with Daniel. I think Daniel's, apart from the money factor, I think when he went to Renault and when he went to McLaren, he became too analytical. He became swamped with all the digital technology that was happening, and it just got on top of him. And he lost that gut feel for how to drive a racing car. Yeah. There's too much. There's too many people trying to justify their jobs in a Formula One team by being the head of this, head of that, and doing this. And you see all these people on the radio, and they all look so serious. They never smile. They hardly ever talk, from what I can see. They're staring at these screens throughout the race, throughout practice, throughout qualifying. What are they all doing? Get out in the circuit and watch the guy. It's just, they overcomplicate it. Racing drivers are racing drivers. They're simple human beings that do something incredibly well, and they're all very talented. And there's no way anybody should say Liam Lawson is not quick or doesn't have the talent. For sure he does. But he became dominated by data. That's what's destroyed him right now. And I think when he goes back now to racing bulls, I think it'll be, okay, welcome back, Liam. We know what you're doing. We trust you. We know you're going to be quick. Here's the car. Get on with it. I'm sure it's going to be that. Apart from anything else, they haven't got quite the same depth of technology at Red Bull, which is a good thing from his point of view.
It's a good shout, Peter. What do you reckon on? I feel bad for Liam. I know that he said some things. He was quite satirical even and dismissive about Yuki, saying that he's old news. I beat him in feeder formula. What's Yuki Tsunoda got to do with it? He said as well about adaptability that he doesn't believe in adapting to a car. Either you're fast or you're not fast. Now though, my heart kind of bleeds for Liam. I feel like they need to get their arms around him. But I'm not sure that Red Bull is the team to do that. Helmut Marko came out and said that he hasn't been demoted. We've just switched him. We've been our decision enables Liam to continue his F1 career. To that, Mr. Windsor, you say?
Well, what I just said, he's not actually driving for Red Bull per se. He's driving for Racing Bulls again in Italy, having pasta in lunchtime. It's a completely different situation. And in that situation, I think he will thrive again. I think he'll go really well. And assuming they just let him get on with it and they don't try and confuse him too much. And I don't think they will. I think they will let him get on with it. And I think that's a good thing. So it's quite far away from the Red Bull the Red Bull Helmut Marko thing. It is a different team in that sense. And so I think he'll be fine. And yeah, then they didn't fire him completely. I mean, he's unbelievably lucky not to have been fired completely, I think, actually, given the way Red Bull have behaved in the past with some of their drivers. And, he could have been completely out of a drive with no money behind him whatsoever. And they could be running, I don't know, anybody in the car. But they're giving him another go, and that's good.
Fair play. Fair play to Red Bull. Let's talk about Ferrari for a couple of minutes, Peter, because Italian press are being fairly, I don't want to say a bit premature maybe around Ferrari. And again, press and media can do this, right? It's either the very best thing that you've ever seen or the very worst. And right now, if you're reading the press and media autoracer.it, it sounds like you would be forgiven for thinking that this is the end of the world for Scuderia Ferrari, that Frederick Vasseur, his length, his time as team principal potentially coming to an end unless he can win silverware this year. What do you make of that, Peter? Are they a million miles away from the truth?
Well, they just won a race, didn't they? Why are they saying all that?
A sprint race, though. Not
Well,
the
it's a
race
race.
proper.
They still won a race from the pole. I mean, give me a break. I think, yeah, obviously I'm saying that slightly sarcastically because the Chinese weekend engenders any observer to say, what is going on at Ferrari? Up one day, down the next, no control, poor management, or whatever conclusion you want to draw. Yeah, sprint race win, Sunday didn't look very good. So, and then disqualification, obviously. So poor management on the ground. But yeah, Ferrari love to, and Ferrari critiques, if that's the right word, IQUES rather than ICS, I think in this case, love to jump on Ferrari when they have a really bad thing happen to them, like the two disqualifications after a pretty mediocre race. But you know, anyone, we all know that it's too early to say that, and let's see what happens. Charles' pace, was it with a front flexi wing in the end? I don't know. Maybe he's benefiting from that, but certainly his pace with that broken front wing was extraordinary. And I think yeah, but my only question mark is Lewis, really. I think it was such an odd Sunday for Lewis after such a great Saturday. And as I've said all along, they should have kept Carlos Sainz. Not that Lewis isn't going to do a better job than Carlos. I think he will. That's not my point. My point is to get the best from Charles, it would have been better to have had Carlos in the other car. So, in case anybody wants to quote me out of context there, that's the context of what I'm trying to say. And so, yeah, when you've got Lewis there, who's such a global megastar, and you got Charles there on his side of the garage trying to be quiet and get on with his job, and the car's proving to be quite difficult. These are difficult moments. I suppose you've got to say that for me, yeah, obviously I think Freddie Vasseur's management was questionable in the last two races. I think very poor radio management of the radio transmissions in Melbourne, and I think obviously the disqualification thing in China was under his remit, and because he's basically in charge of engineering as well as everything else, and so yeah, that's a conundrum for me because the Freddie Vasseur that we know and love, certainly from the ASM ART days, seemed to be bulletproof when it came to all that sort of stuff. When all the sort of everyday management of the team, radios, car compliance, all that stuff was, take it for granted. They get some other things wrong, like setup. That we know that is incredibly difficult. But the things that are in your control, you'd put Freddie Vasseur at the top of your list of people, really, I think, to make sure they happen. So that's a bit of an issue, I suppose. And let's give him a little bit of time, see what happens. Maybe he's overloaded now in terms of not having hired Adrian Newey, and he's got to be sure now that the technical team he's got below him is going to deliver. That's a massive pressure. So he's, I guess, on top of everything they're doing and planning technically, aerodynamically with the car, plus driver management, plus technical prescription management. It's a lot going on for him, plus dealing with the media as well.
Oof. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Your prediction for the Suzuka Grand Prix, apparently 70% chance of wet on the morning, rain even on the morning of the Sunday race day. Who have you got?
I think I've got Lando because I just think his soft inputs will, and I think he's so confident now. I think he'll be great up in the S through the S's, and I think he'll be really good through the Degnas, and I think he'll be the guy that finds the sweet spot in a difficult, what probably will be a difficult weekend again in terms of tire management and weather. I think he'll be, and he's obviously got a great race car beneath him, and so I think he'll do the job this weekend. I'll be surprised if he doesn't. And I think George again is not saying anything new here, but I think George will be right up there as well for Merck. Love to see a Ferrari there as well, only for the sake of everything. But, got to question a little bit. Max will probably do what he did in China, really good qualifying lap, but he may struggle to sustain that over a Grand Prix distance, although it's quite difficult, of course, to overtake at Suzuka.
Yeah.
And I imagine Red Bull in their very efficient way will be maximizing the opportunity of getting a decent grid position, knowing that once they've got a grid position at Suzuka, there's a half reasonable chance they're going to be able to hold that. So yeah, you got to include Max in the game as well. Oscar Piastri, definitely. Why
Oof.
not? And he takes a slight glitch from Lando for Oscar to be right there as well. Again, not saying anything new here, but that is it, isn't it? That's the way inevitably it's going to be. The question is, will Ferrari find a sweet spot early on with their tire management or not? And if they don't, they seem to be, takes them a while to get through. Whereas Mercedes and Red Bull tend to get on top of tire management issues quite early on. Ferrari tend to take longer, so far anyway. But if they can get a decent window early on, then obviously Charles and Lewis will be there.
Mr. Windsor, you're a legend. As we round third base, let me ask you one final question. I was going back into the archives and reading an old edition of Motorsport magazine. In there, they talked about the greatest laps ever, citing 83, Beloff at the Nordschleife, Juan Fangio 57, again on Collins and Hawthorne, citing Ayrton Senna's very famous 1988 out-of-body experience, qualifying lap pole 1.5 seconds down the road from Alain Prost. I always wanted to ask you this, Peter. What in your humble opinion, is the greatest lap that you've ever seen, F1 or other motorsport?
Oh, it has to be one I've seen.
Well, broaden it out. One that you've not necessarily seen in person, but that you're aware of.
Well, in terms of one I've seen, I would put Nigel Mansell's Ferrari lap of Silverstone in 1990 up there as alongside any good lap I've ever seen, when he outqualified Alain Prost in the same car by over a second.
Ooh.
And didn't finish the race, as we remember, but unbelievable lap through Stone Club. Unbelievable. So there was that. I think in ones I didn't see, it would have to be Jim Clark, Belgian Grand Prix 67 in the Lotus 49 with no wings, 190 odd through the Master Kink, with the tires sort of going like this on the straight. They're so narrow off the rims almost, and no seat belts, no full face helmet. And again, comfortably on the pole by a ridiculous margin. And that lap always, Jimmy was brilliant in many qualifying laps, but around Spa, the old Spa, in a Lotus 49, in only its second race, when everybody knew it was super fragile as well, and Jimmy was that quick, just makes the hair stand up on my arms even thinking about it now.
Blimey. Mr. Windsor, legend as always. I could keep you for another 60 minutes reminiscing about when time.
Sorry, I'm going to add one more. I'm going to add one.
Go on.
Carlos Reutemann, Monaco 78 in the Ferrari T3, when he got the pole on Thursday, when the track was still slow and the track was much quicker. He was doing some other stuff on Saturday and he still held the pole. That lap, I think, was one of the best laps I've ever seen Carlos drive.
Wow.
Super.
Wow.
And also, got to say, here we go. Monza 1981 Italian Grand Prix, when Carlos split the Renaults as well in the Cosworth powered Williams. Oof. No front wing on the car, flat through the second Lesmo, when the second Lesmo was a seriously quick corner.
Blimey. A couple of the best laps. Max Verstappen gets a worthy mention as well. China 2017. Yep. And surely you've got to talk about Senna Donington 93, maybe? I don't know.
Maybe. There's a lot of talk about that race. For me, he had a good car. Prost was not very good that day in the active Williams. Who did he beat? I hate to say that, but he disappeared. And I mean, Ayrton drove some unbelievable pole laps. There's no doubt about that. But to start mentioning all these laps, inevitably, there's always going to be one that you don't. So I'm just focusing on drivers that normally don't get a mention when everybody's talking about the great laps. And we all know the great laps Max has driven, Lewis has driven, Michael Schumacher's driven, Ayrton Senna's driven. I'm talking about perhaps talking about laps that some people aren't so familiar with.
I've got a couple to hand that you might like, actually, that don't often get a mention. Sterling, 1955 Mille Miglia. Um,
Oh, I thought we were talking about Formula One. Were you talking about laps, qualifying laps, or races are we talking about now?
just anything. The greatest
Oh,
laps in
okay.
any series.
Oh,
that you've
all
ever
right. Well,
seen.
that's a different thing. I thought you were talking about pole laps. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, Sterling, obviously 55, Mille Miglia. Sterling in anything, really. In the 250F Monza,
Oh,
1950, 4, whatever.
Sterling
55
61
British
Monaco.
Grand Prix, Sterling, Monaco 61 and the Nürburgring in 61. Tony Brooks at Spa in any given car. So it goes on. There are just so many wonderful performances over
Yeah.
the years and so many different drivers' cars. And then that's when you have to start getting a bit unobjective, really, because, you've got to say, well, there's too many out there, but these are the guys I really like and really remember.
100%.
And yeah, Fangio Rouen 57 in
Tough.
terms of a win was as good as it gets, French Grand Prix. I see, just changing the subject a little bit, but I see Red Bull have got a new livery for the Japanese Grand Prix, mirroring kind of the livery of Richie Ginther's Honda 65. Great car, that 65 Honda,
Yeah.
and 1.5 liter transverse V12. I mean, what a car, revving like crazy. And lovely to see. I mean, it's a shame in a way, because the beauty of that livery of the 65 Honda was just the white and the red roundel. And of course, there's so much other stuff on the Red Bull, it's kind of hard to see it through it. But nice touch, I think, from Red Bull to be doing that. And it must irk them, I would have thought, that Honda, they left and now they're coming back with Aston Martin. I wouldn't feel so warmly towards them as Red Bull obviously do, but because of that. But anyway, good to see them doing that.
It's a really nice touch, right, to commemorate.
It is.
The first time that a Honda engine, or a Honda engine car even, in the RA272 won a race 60 years ago now. So no, I concur, Mr. Windsor.
And I think you'll find also that was the first win for Goodyear in Formula One, was it not?
Oh, you've gone way above. This is way above my pay grade now, Mr. Windsor.
I think it was. So yeah, that was a significant race. That Jimmy, of course, had won the World Championship long before the Mexican Grand Prix, and 65 was the year in which Jimmy won not only the Formula One World Championship but also the Indianapolis 500 in the same year.
Not a bad peddler.
Not a bad peddler. Not a bad peddler, you could say.
Not a bad peddler, Mr. Jim Clark. Peter, you've been an absolute legend as always. Super generous of your time, sir. If you enjoy these market-leading insights, purple sectors each and every single time from the one that they call Peter Windsor, go and subscribe to that fella. If you're not already, what are you doing with your life? But subscribe to him on YouTube. If you like ingesting your F1 content by dint of your favourite podcasting platform, then of course it's Short Corners. 5 stars and follow. If you're watching this on the YouTube, share, like, all the usual gubbins. If you're listening on a podcast platform, as always, be sure to drop me a cheeky 5 stars and a follow. Mr. Peter D. Windsor, you're a legend as always. Thank you so much for your time. You guys in the chat, do me a favour between now and next time, as always, remember to look but never stare.